I am Maya. I'm a registered clinical counselor with No Fear Counseling. I've been a counselor with No Fear for about 5 years, and I work out of the Morgan Crossing office in South Surrey. I wanted to maybe talk about today some of the things that might be on your mind when you're starting counseling, some of the questions that you might have, and maybe help to make this process a little bit easier for you. I'll go through some frequently asked questions, and hopefully you can get to know me in the meantime and see if I might be the right fit for you. When I thought about going to school to become a counselor, I always thought about the way in which I would like to help someone, the way in which I could possibly help guide, support someone through some of their challenges. I remember going to my first therapy session and feeling like it was a mismatch right away, not because the person was wrong or bad at what they were doing, but I think it just didn't feel like it was the right fit. And sometimes I think about, well, what would the right fit be? I always tell a future client to think about how they feel when they meet a potential counselor. Are you feeling comfortable? Does the person feel warm? Do you feel like they can answer some of your questions? And do you feel like you could open up with them? Another thing to consider would also be around any sort of cultural understanding. Does that counselor come from a place of curiosity where they may be able to understand the culture that you're speaking about or coming from? And do they come to you with some of that lens? I think that starting therapy can be such a difficult thing, but also such a courageous thing. Sometimes we have to remember that starting counseling can look a little bit muddy. Oftentimes, I will get clients who come in and they share with me that they want to start counseling, but they're scared. And I think that fear is a huge driver sometimes in starting something, but also being hesitant. And sometimes I think we need to remember that we can be fearful, but still start something hard all at the same time. Counseling can feel really muddy in the beginning because we're getting to know one another. And there's so many things that we might be worried about sharing or scared to share. And oftentimes we feel a little bit jumbled before we start to feel better. And so don't be alarmed if you notice some of those things happening after your first session. Do keep in mind, though, as a counselor, it is my job to help guide some of these conversations in the future. And hopefully things start to feel a little bit more clear as we go on through the process. A lot of clients ask me, what do I need to prepare in order to start counseling? And I always say, come exactly how you are. Come with an open mind, come with any questions you have. It's a big process sometimes. At the same time, it can feel really helpful to just have a space to share without judgment and without an agenda sometimes, because that's what we need. I would always say, come with any questions you might have for me, but also think about some of the goals that you might have. And if you don't have goals off the bat, that's okay. We can find them together. Another question that I get asked often is, what does progress look like? And how do I know if I'm doing better? Two-parted. I think progress looks different for everybody. Progress is something that we can measure on an individual level, depending on some of your goals. Progress can also be subjective in terms of maybe how you're doing, in terms of functionality. Are you feeling better in terms of mood? Are we hitting some of our goals or starting to work towards them? I think those are the pieces that we think about when we think about progress. We also determine them based on your measure of what progress is and not what my measure is. I think sometimes in therapy, we have to think about expectations. And oftentimes, I always think about, as a therapist, I always think about what you would kind of expect. And some of those things could be, are we asking the questions that make us ponder or think or get deeper into some of our processes? Are we able to start looking at some of our patterns to see maybe how we show up every day in different parts of our world? It's hard to know exactly what it is. And I think sometimes with things feeling gray in therapy, we sometimes find that really daunting as well. I think another question that comes up is, how do I know that things are getting better or that I'm making progress? And again, that comes down to you. What parts of your world feel better for you? Do you feel like you're making progress in some of the goals that we have discussed? And if you aren't, that's okay. It's also my job to help work through those goals and guide you. And so if something's not working, I would always say, let your therapist know, because we can hopefully then find a way to work around some of these pieces of either progress or goals together. Some of my topics and things that I love to work with in therapy are things like family dynamics, relationship issues, cultural dynamics. That's a really big one that I'm very passionate about. Life transitions as well. Going from, let's say, for example, someone who's completing university and going into the job and career world. This is a huge transition that you're making, and it comes with a lot of challenge sometimes. Going from living on your own to possibly moving into a family, a relationship, or a marriage. And there are a lot of changes that we need to navigate. Sometimes we need the space to have the conversations to work through some of these challenges. Another question that I get asked a lot is, have I been to therapy myself? The answer is yes. I think it's so important that therapists do their own personal work because it helps us be better therapists. It helps us have a better understanding of what some of our clients might be experiencing and having that perspective as well. Sometimes I have clients ask about homework and if that's something that they have to do. And I will always say, if it's something that you want, I am happy to provide it. I do believe that a lot of the work that we talk about and the things that we talk about there in therapy, most of that work actually happens outside the therapy space. I only get to see a client maybe once a week, maybe every 2 weeks, maybe even once a month for 50 minutes. But you're spending a lot more time out of the therapy space and the room. So I really hope that I can give you some tools to work with outside the therapy space. Mm. How does a client know that they're a good fit? I think this is a great question. I always go back to thinking about, how does a client feel? So how would you feel coming into the space with a therapist? Do you feel really anxious? Do you feel grounded? Is there a level of comfort that is there for you? Do you feel that you're in a non-judgmental space where eventually you might be able to share? I think those are some of the things to maybe be aware of when you're shopping for a therapist in terms of some of the things to look for. And if you decide that a therapist is a good fit.